The porch light was off, the driveway was empty, and there was a strange car parked crooked in front of my own house. And in that single moment, every ounce of joy I had carried across 3,000 miles turned into a cold, tightening fear in my chest. My name is Ethan Calloway, and I had just spent 14 months in a place where sunrises meant nothing except another day survived, where the smell of dust and diesel replaced the smell of home cooking, and where the only thing that kept me moving forward through checkpoints and long nights on watch was a single photograph tucked inside my vest pocket, a photograph of a house with blue shutters, a woman on the porch swing, and a little girl in yellow rain boots chasing bubbles across the front lawn. That photograph had survived sandstorms, gunfire drills, and sleepless nights. It had a crease down the middle from being folded and unfolded 1,000 times. And on the long flight home, I had promised myself that the very first thing I would do was walk through that front door, drop my duffel bag, and pull my daughter into my arms so tight she'd complain I was squeezing the air out of her. But nothing could have prepared me for what I found when I finally turned my key in that lock. Before I tell you what happened next, if you believe, like I do now, that people deserve second chances, and that even the most broken situations can be healed by kindness and courage, then do me a favor right now. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, share this video with someone who needs a little hope today, and make sure you're subscribed to Karma Chronicles, because stories like mine deserve to be heard, and I promise you, this one is far from over. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone waved at everyone, where the diner on Main Street knew your order before you sat down, and where joining the military wasn't just a career choice, it was practically a family tradition. My father served, my grandfather served, and when I turned 22 I followed the same path, enlisting with a heart full of purpose and a head full of dreams about serving something bigger than myself. 3 years into my service, I met Naomi at a mutual friend's barbecue. She had this laugh that filled up an entire room, the kind of laugh that made strangers turn and smile without even knowing why. We fell in love fast, the way people do when they're young and certain that nothing bad could ever touch them. We got married in a small chapel with folding chairs and mismatched flowers, and 18 months later, our daughter Sienna was born on a snowy February morning that I still remember in perfect detail. The hospital room, the nurse's soft voice, and the tiny weight of my daughter in my arms for the very first time. Life was good for those first few years. I balanced deployments with home leave, Naomi worked part-time as a hairdresser, and Sienna grew from a chubby-cheeked toddler into a bright, curious little girl who loved dinosaurs, hated bedtime, and asked 1,000 questions a day about everything from why the sky was blue to why Daddy had to leave sometimes. Every deployment tore a piece of me away, but every homecoming stitched it back together. I missed her first day of school once. I missed a birthday. I missed a school play where she played a talking sunflower, something Naomi recorded for me on a shaky phone video that I watched so many times overseas that the file eventually corrupted from being opened too often. But through all of it, we held on. We were a family that survived on video calls, handwritten letters, and the unshakable belief that love could stretch across any distance without snapping. Then came the deployment that changed everything. It was supposed to be a standard rotation, 6 months, maybe 8 if things got complicated. Instead, due to circumstances far beyond my control, shifting mission priorities, a unit shortage, and then an injury that required a lengthy recovery at an overseas medical facility before I could even be sent home, 6 months stretched into 14. 14 months of missed calls due to unreliable signal, 14 months of letters that arrived weeks late, 14 months where the voice of my daughter on the phone slowly changed in ways I couldn't quite place, growing more mature, more distant, more like a young lady and less like the little girl in yellow rain boots I had left behind. Naomi tried to keep me updated as best she could, but her messages became shorter over time, more clipped, more guarded. I told myself it was just stress. I told myself she was exhausted from doing it all alone. I told myself a lot of things to keep the fear at bay, because fear, when you're thousands of miles from home and utterly powerless to fix anything, is a luxury you cannot afford to indulge. When my unit finally received word that we were heading home, I felt something in my chest loosen for the first time in over a year. I called Naomi the moment I could, my voice cracking with excitement as I told her the date, the flight number, the exact hour I'd be walking through our front door. She was quiet on the phone, quieter than I expected, but she said she'd be there, and that was enough for me. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to ruin the moment with worry. I just wanted to get home. The flight was long, the layovers longer, and by the time my connecting flight touched down and I finally caught a rideshare to my own neighborhood, the sun was dipping low behind the rooftops, painting the sky in soft orange and lavender streaks. I remember staring out the car window at streets I hadn't seen in over a year, at the same mailbox with the dented flag, the same oak tree on the corner that Sienna used to climb, the same fire hydrant she used to hopscotch around on her way to the school bus. Everything looked the same, and yet something in my gut told me everything had changed. When the car pulled up to my house, my heart sank at what I saw. The porch light, which Naomi always kept on for me no matter what, was dark. The flower pots that used to line the steps were gone. And parked crookedly in the driveway, taking up the space where my truck usually sat, was a car I didn't recognize, an older sedan with a cracked taillight and a bumper sticker for a community college I'd never heard Naomi mention. I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, duffel bag slung over my shoulder, feeling like a stranger in front of my own home. Every instinct told me to knock, but some deeper, more desperate part of me still had a key in my pocket, still believed I belonged there, so I walked up the steps and let myself in. The smell hit me first, not the familiar scent of Naomi's cooking or the lavender candles she loved, but something unfamiliar, like a different laundry detergent, a different life. The living room furniture had been rearranged. There was a blanket I didn't recognize thrown over the couch, and on the coffee table sat a mug with lipstick on the rim, lipstick in a shade Naomi never wore. My mind raced through a dozen terrible possibilities in the span of a few seconds, each one worse than the last, my training kicking in even in a moment that had nothing to do with combat, my body tensing, my senses sharpening. And then I heard footsteps on the stairs. I turned, my heart hammering, half expecting to see Naomi's face, half dreading it. And instead, I found myself looking at a young woman I had never seen before in my life. She was maybe 17 or 18, tall, with dark hair pulled into a loose braid, wearing an oversized sweatshirt and sweatpants, standing frozen on the staircase with a phone in her hand and an expression of pure shock on her face. For a moment, neither of us said anything. I remember gripping the strap of my duffel bag so tightly my knuckles turned white, my mind screaming questions I couldn't voice. Who are you? Why are you in my house? Where is my wife? Where is my daughter? Who are you? I finally managed to ask, my voice rougher than I intended, more accusation than question. The young woman's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, then something that looked almost like heartbreak, and finally a kind of desperate hope that I didn't understand at all. She took a step down the stairs, slow and careful, the way you'd approach a wounded animal, and she said the words that I will never forget for as long as I live. "Dad, don't you recognize me?" The duffel bag slipped from my shoulder and hit the floor with a thud that seemed to echo through the entire house. I stared at her, at this stranger calling me Dad, searching her face for any trace of the little girl I had left behind, and for one horrifying, disorienting moment, I genuinely could not find her. The chubby cheeks were gone, replaced by sharp, elegant features. The gap-toothed smile I remembered had been replaced by straight, even teeth behind lips that trembled as she watched me struggle to place her. 14 months. It had only been 14 months. How could my daughter have transformed this much in 14 months? "Sienna," I whispered, the name coming out broken, disbelieving. She nodded, tears already spilling down her cheeks, and in that instant, the resemblance clicked into place. The shape of her eyes, so much like Naomi's, the small dimple in her left cheek that I used to kiss every night before bed. It was her. It was really her. But she looked nothing like the child in the photograph in my vest pocket, and the shock of that realization hit me like a physical blow. I had missed something. I had missed everything. While I was overseas counting days on a calendar and staring at an outdated photograph, My daughter had been growing into an entirely different person, and I had not been there to witness a single moment of it. I don't remember crossing the room, but somehow I found myself pulling her into my arms, both of us crying, both of us holding on like we were afraid the other might disappear if we let go. She smelled different, too, no longer like children's shampoo and crayons, but like a perfume I didn't recognize, a scent that belonged to a young woman I hadn't had the chance to meet yet. We stood there in the entryway for what felt like an eternity, and through her tears, Sienna kept apologizing over and over, saying she was sorry, saying she should have warned me, saying she didn't know how to explain everything over the phone. It was only after we finally sat down on the rearranged couch, after she'd wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt and taken a shaky breath, that the rest of the story began to unravel. And with it, the truth about everything that had happened while I was away. Naomi, she told me, had been diagnosed with a serious illness almost a year earlier, something she had chosen not to tell me while I was deployed, terrified that the stress and worry would compromise my safety or my focus in a combat zone. She had gone through the early stages of treatment quietly, leaning on her sister for support, keeping our daughter shielded from the worst of it as long as she could, and slowly, painfully, trying to hold our family together with a secret so heavy it eventually became impossible to carry alone. The treatments had taken a toll, hospital stays, medications that left her exhausted and changed, months where she simply didn't have the strength to manage the house, to answer calls at the right times, to sound like herself on the phone. That was why the messages had grown shorter. That was why her voice had sounded distant. She wasn't distant from me emotionally. She had been fighting for her life, quietly, without a word, because she loved me too much to make me choose between my duty and her fear. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, Sienna, only 16 at the time, had stepped up in ways no child should ever have to. She had taken on responsibilities far beyond her years, managing prescriptions, driving her mother to appointments the moment she got her license, cooking meals, keeping the household running while trying to finish high school and process the terrifying possibility of losing her mother. She told me she used to sit in her room some nights, staring at my photograph on her nightstand, wondering how she was supposed to explain any of this to me over a scratchy overseas phone call, wondering if telling me the truth would break my concentration at exactly the wrong moment and get me killed. So she made a choice that broke my heart, even as it filled me with an aching, overwhelming pride. She decided to protect me from the truth the same way I had always tried to protect her, carrying the weight silently so that I could come home in one piece. The car in the driveway, she explained, belonged to her aunt, Naomi's younger sister, who had been staying with them to help during the roughest stretch of treatment. The rearranged furniture was because they'd needed space near the stairs for a temporary medical chair during Naomi's weakest weeks. The unfamiliar mug belonged to the aunt as well. Every small detail that had triggered my fear and confusion had a painfully human explanation behind it, and none of them were the disaster my mind had conjured on the front steps. I asked, my voice barely steady, where Naomi was now, and Sienna told me she was upstairs resting, that her treatments had reached a turning point in recent weeks, that the doctors were cautiously optimistic, and that she had actually been getting stronger, slowly returning to herself, though the road ahead was still long. She said her mother had wanted to be the one to tell me everything the moment I walked through the door, had planned exactly what she would say, but exhaustion had gotten the better of her that afternoon, and she had fallen asleep, unaware that her husband was already standing in the living room, unaware that her daughter was the one who would have to deliver the truth first. I climbed those stairs like a man walking toward both the best and worst moment of his life, each step heavier than the last, my mind replaying every phone call over the past year, searching for clues I had missed, moments where I should have pushed harder, asked more, listened closer. When I opened the bedroom door, I found Naomi asleep in the afternoon light, thinner than I remembered, a soft cap covering hair that treatment had taken from her, but somehow, impossibly, still radiating that same quiet strength that had made me fall in love with her all those years ago. I sat on the edge of the bed and simply watched her breathe for a long moment, overwhelmed by a wave of love and grief and relief so tangled together that I couldn't separate one feeling from another. When she woke and saw me sitting there, her eyes filled instantly with tears, and the first thing she said, her voice raspy from sleep and illness, was that she was sorry, that she never wanted me to find out this way, that she had wanted to protect me from a fear she couldn't control from thousands of miles away. I told her there was nothing to forgive, that the only thing that mattered was that she had fought, that she was still here, that our daughter had grown into someone extraordinary because she'd learned strength and sacrifice from watching her mother do exactly the same thing. We held each other for a long time that evening, the three of us eventually gathering in that same bedroom, Sienna curling up on the edge of the bed the way she used to as a little girl during thunderstorms, and for the first time in 14 months, I felt like I was truly home, not because the house looked the same, not because everything had returned to how I left it, but because the people I loved were still fighting, still breathing, still choosing each other despite everything that had tried to tear us apart. The weeks that followed were not easy. Naomi still had treatments ahead of her, difficult days where the fear crept back in, moments where all of us had to relearn how to communicate honestly instead of protecting each other through silence. Sienna and I spent long evenings on the back porch, the same porch from my photograph, slowly rebuilding the relationship that 14 months and one terrifying secret had reshaped. I learned who she had become, not just physically, but as a person, someone braver and more resilient than I had ever given her credit for, someone who had shouldered the weight of adulthood before she was ready, and had somehow come out the other side with more compassion, not less. We talked about everything I had missed, and instead of mourning the moments I couldn't get back, I chose to focus on every moment still ahead of us. I want to pause here and ask you something, because I think it matters. If this story has touched your heart even a little bit, if it reminded you of your own family, your own sacrifices, or someone you love who has quietly carried a burden without telling you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Comment below and tell me about a moment in your life when someone you loved turned out to be stronger than you ever imagined. These stories matter, and hearing from you reminds all of us that we're not carrying our struggles alone. Naomi's health continued to improve over the following months, slowly but steadily, each scan bringing better news than the last, until the day finally came when her doctors used the word remission, a word our entire family had been praying to hear for what felt like an eternity. We celebrated quietly, just the three of us, with a simple dinner at our kitchen table, no big party, no grand gestures, just a family that had survived something enormous, sitting together, grateful for the ordinary miracle of another shared meal. Sienna went on to finish high school with honors despite everything she had juggled, and she later told me that the experience, as painful as it was, had shaped her decision to pursue nursing, wanting to give other families the same kind of care and strength that had helped carry hers through the darkest stretch of their lives. As for me, I requested a reassignment closer to home after that deployment, unwilling to risk missing another chapter of my family's story the way I had almost missed this one. It wasn't an easy decision professionally, but it was the easiest decision I've ever made as a husband and a father. I think about that afternoon often, the empty driveway, the strange car, the porch light that wasn't on, the stranger on the stairs who turned out to be the most important person in my world, simply grown into someone I hadn't yet had the chance to meet. I think about how close I came to walking through that door with fear and suspicion instead of love, and how grateful I am that in the end, love was the only thing that mattered enough to hold on to. Before I go, I have one small request, and it means more to me than you might realize. If this story moved you even a little, if it made you think about the people in your own life who quietly carry more than they let on, please leave a comment with just one word: home, so I know this story reached you and touched something real. Coming home from deployment, I expected to walk back into the same life I had left behind, but what I found instead was a family that had grown, suffered, and healed in ways I never could have imagined from thousands of miles away. I learned that homecoming isn't about everything staying the same while you're gone. It's about choosing to love the people your family has become, scars and growth and all, and standing beside them for whatever comes next. If you believe in the strength of families who hold on through the hardest storms, and if you believe that love always finds its way back home, don't forget to like, comment, Share this story with someone who needs it. And subscribe to Karma Chronicles for more stories that remind us what truly matters. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I'll see you in the next story.